This is my inaugural video of trying to forecast the 2020 election. In the interest of full disclosure, I am not a political analyst or expert by any means, and I do not support the incumbent president, Donald Trump, just in the interest of full disclosure, but I do try to forecast these things, actually giving Trump a little bit of an edge higher than the polls, because one, Democratic voters are generally more complacent than Republican voters, and the theory that some Trump voters don't always tell the truth in the polls. So I might do this once a week. I don't know yet. Depends how it goes. But for today and for every time I do this, I'm gonna fill out the map that you could see from 270thewin.com. Right now it's blank. We'll fill it up along the way. I'm gonna fill it up based on projections made by 278 to win from 25,000 simulations. I'm gonna go ahead and fill in the states that 100% of the time have gone to either candidate. So let's start with that, and then we'll head on to the swing states. So one thing you'll notice when we start to fill out this map is that there's a lot more states for Donald Trump that are pretty much a sure thing. So we'll start off with those, a lot of them starting out in the South and the Midwest, which is no surprise considering where a lot of these elections tend to go. So right now, again, I'm just filling out the states that 100% of the time out of 25,000 simulations, this is how these states always vote. I always forget West Virginia, even though it's a state that generally always goes for Trump. And Nebraska and Maine, you could see, are shown in different districts. So not all their electoral votes go to the same candidate all the time. So we're just filling out those for Donald Trump. So I think, and South Carolina. So those are all the states that 100% of the time out of 25,000 times are going to Trump. Now for Joe Biden, these are the states that, again, 100% of the times, these are the states, which basically means on election night, unless something drastically changes between now and then, these are the states that you can fully expect each candidate to carry, unless things go very, very differently in one of these states. And some of these other states that are left, they might be leaning 99% the one way, but we'll get to that in a little bit. Forgot about Vermont over there. But as you can see right now, for the states that are basically a sure thing for either candidate, Joe Biden has 183 electoral votes to work with, and Donald Trump has 122. So as you can see, what that means is that the Democrats need 87 more electoral votes for victory, and the Republicans need 148. Before we get to the states that are really swing states, we're also going to look at some of the states in here that are basically what we'll call likely states, meaning that 90% of the time or more, these states are going to one candidate. Now for Trump, the only state that isn't 100% of the time is Montana. I don't really know why Montana, the simulations say Montana would ever go to Biden, but again, we'll put the likely symbol there for Trump. And there are a few states in here that will say are likely for Joe Biden, meaning 90% of the time or more out of 25,000 simulations are going to Joe Biden. And there are a few states that are important there that used to not be as much of a sure thing as they seem to be right now. That is Virginia, Minnesota, New Mexico, Colorado, and um, 2 electoral votes in Maine, and yep, that's it. So states like Virginia, Colorado, and New Mexico, for example, are a little bit more of a sure thing for the Democrats than they have been in the past. So, in all likelihood, these are the states that will almost for sure, again, 90% or more of the time, the only state that the highest state that was projected for Hillary Clinton in 2016 was Wisconsin, which was about 83.5%. So we're making this 90% for a likelihood, and we'll lean on to the lean states in a little bit. So again, now you have 222 electoral votes for Joe Biden. That's just 10 shy of where Hillary was at. You know, where she ended up at in the 2016 election, and 125 for Donald Trump. So some of the things you might notice here that might seem kind of weird are that states like Texas and Georgia, for example, are not, filled in yet for Republican Donald Trump. These are states that are, I think, largely seen as Republican strongholds, but with demographics changing in places like Texas and Arizona, and the Black Lives Matter movement, in places with big cities like Atlanta, it's not as much as a sure thing. But now we're gonna look at some of the swing states that really are going to decide this election, and we're gonna look at a comparison between what the election looked like in 2016 on July 1st and what the election looks like today on July 1st, 2020. So as of today, according to 538, which combines, a whole bunch of polls, Joe Biden is up by 9.4 points on average today, 50.8%, 41.4%. And again, this is what it was ended up on election day. For Hillary Clinton, it was about a 4-point advantage. And if we go back in time to July 1st, 2016, that was about a 5.6 point advantage. So right now, Joe Biden is outperforming what Hillary Clinton did 4 years ago to the date. Again, we're about 4 months and a few days away from the election, so things might change. But that's just what nationally it looked like now and then. Joe Biden is outperforming Hillary by about 4 points or so. Now let's move to the real battleground states, which are some of the states you see here. Some of the states are a little bit less of a battleground state than usual, but for the purposes of discussion, we'll talk about the big players here. Obviously, Florida, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Arizona. These are probably the 5 states that I think are going to decide the election. So we'll start with Florida, which obviously is always a big point of concern. So you could see this is from 2016. This was on election day. So it shouldn't have come as a huge surprise that Hillary Clinton didn't win Florida on election day. She was only up by less than a point, by about 0.6 points. So that shouldn't come as big of a surprise. But if you look back at July 1st, 2016, that lead was a little bit less than 5, around 4.9 points. So that was in 2016, 4.9 point advantage for Hillary Clinton. And we look this year in Florida, Joe Biden is up by 7.1 points. So again, it doesn't seem like a huge difference. It's about a little bit more than 2-point difference. Biden outperforming Hillary at this point in the cycle. But for the purposes of these videos, we're going to say anything that any state that has more of a 5 point advantage for either candidate, we can put that into what we'll call a lean-in category for either candidate. So let's do that right now. We'll say today, as of July 1st. Again, a few months away from Election Day, but as of July 1st, we can say that Florida is leaning. Doesn't mean that it's going to be like that on Election Day. And Florida is constantly changing, but is leaning, as of today, to the Democratic side. Again, months away, but if you think about the states that the Democrats are going to carry, California, Illinois, New York, all of these northeastern chunk states, if you win Florida, then it's not a guarantee, but it's almost a guarantee, unless you don't carry almost any of these other states, that you're going to win the election. That would bring Joe Biden to 251 electoral votes, which would bring him very close to where he needs to be to win the election. We'll look at a state that surprised a lot of people in 2016, the state of Pennsylvania. I think many people saw this as a very big Democratic state. On election day, you could see Hillary was leading by about 3.7 points. Again, in my opinion, margin because of Democratic complacency would be about 5 points. So it might come as a little bit of a surprise that Donald Trump won the state, but not as much as a surprise as some people may have thought. But if we look back on July 1st, you could see that Hillary Clinton, her lead was pretty substantial. It was at a little bit less than 7 points, 6.5 points. Is what Hillary led Donald Trump in Pennsylvania on July 1st. We look at Pennsylvania today, Joe Biden's leading by 8 points. So, again, outperforming Hillary in the state of Pennsylvania by about 2 points, 1.5 points. And again, over the 5 point threshold. So, at this moment in time, we can say that Pennsylvania is leaning, not a sure thing, but for right now, it's leaning in the direction of Joe Biden. And that's really all Joe Biden needs to do to win the election, assuming, states like Virginia, Minnesota, Colorado, and New Mexico don't go the other way by the time Election Day starts. He just needs those almost 50 electoral votes between Pennsylvania and Florida to win the election. So it's important that he focuses very strongly on those states where, when he's campaigning virtually or however he's going to be campaigning during this time period. And his vice presidential pick isn't even in yet, but one of the women that is close to the state of Florida becomes his VP pick. That might also help his chances in Florida. So again, Joe Biden outperforming on this state what Hillary Clinton was doing in Florida and Pennsylvania. Some of the other states that were big shockers for Democrats that didn't win in 2016 were Michigan and Wisconsin. So let's take a look at Michigan in 2016. So in 2016 on Election Day, big surprise that Hillary didn't win it. She was favored by a little bit over 4 points, 4.2 points, according to the 538 measures that we see here. On July 1st, that number was a lot higher. If we go back in time, we'll see July 1st, 2016, she was favored. She was up by 11.4 points. Which is a huge number. And maybe if the election took place in the summer, things would have been different. but again, it went down to 4.2. The election was taking place on July 1st. She would have had an over 90% chance to win Michigan. That number went down to 78.9% by the time the election came around. And again, because of Democratic complacency and maybe Trump voters not telling the truth during polling, maybe that number is completely accurate. If we look at Michigan today, state that Joe Biden has performed well in polling for a while now and won the primary there, you'll see he has a 10.4 point advantage, so a little bit less than Hillary Clinton had in 2016. She had about 11.5 margin on July 1st in 2016. Again, that number went down by like 7 points by election day. But as of right now, that's a 10.4 point advantage. We'll put that as a state that is leaning in the Democratic Party's favor for the 2020 election. And probably one of the more consistent polling shows that this is one of the states that is consistently showing that Joe Biden is doing well in that state, as are the Democratic parties. You could see here that number was not quite as consistent in 2016. You could see through July it stayed pretty firm, and we'll see how things go in the next couple of months. But come August, that number was a little bit spiraling downward. September, it was especially going the other way. Again, when the Trump came out, that number went higher, and then when they reinvestigated Hillary, that number went lower. But you could see that the polls weren't quite as consistent as they've been so far for Joe Biden. Now, in Wisconsin, this might have been the biggest shocker just based on what the polls showed. In 2016 for Hillary Clinton, she was up by about 5.3 points, at 83.5% chance to win, is what they gave her there. That was on election day, 5.3 points. Moving back to July 1st, 2016, Hillary Clinton was up in the state by about 9.6 points, almost 10 points. Again, that number shrunk by about half by the time it got to election day, and Donald Trump ended up carrying the state. And as of right now, Biden is underperforming Hillary Clinton a little bit in Wisconsin by about a point and a half, 8.1 points. He's up right now. But again, Hillary Clinton was leading in these states since the beginning of the election cycle. You could see Trump was actually leading in the states for a while before the pandemic got bad, and it was very close up until around the middle of May into June and July, where Joe Biden opened up that little bit. So for today, let's give a lean for the Democratic candidate in Wisconsin. Another state that was fairly close in 2016, North Carolina. Now on election day, Hillary was barely favored to beat Trump. She was up by less than a point. You know what happened. She ended up losing the state in July. That number was 1.9 points. She was up by 1.9 points over Trump on July 1st in the state of North Carolina, which has sometimes gone Democratic, but not for over 10 years. Trump's been Obama's first victory. We look at North Carolina today. Biden outperforming Hillary by about 1.5 points. He's up by 3.3 points in North Carolina. So what we're going to say for states that are under the 5-point threshold is we're going to give them a tilt, which is almost a toss-up, but not quite. We'll call it a tilt. meaning that it's leaning, not more than, not as much as leaning. Leaning is another category, but it has a very slight advantage for the um for the Democratic Party, according to the polling numbers. But as I said, that's by 3.3 points. But because of Republicans going out to vote more than Democrats, and the possibility of Trump voters not telling the truth in polls, I'm actually going to put this as a tilt for the Republicans because it's under that 5 point threshold. So, as of right now, I would say Trump may be able to pull off that state by a percentage point or a little bit less. Now, one of the states that is very interesting in this election is Arizona. Trump won it by less than 5 points in 2016. It's been a Republican stronghold since Bill Clinton won it. Obama didn't win it in either of his election cycles. And a Democrat that has won Arizona has never lost the election. So if Joe Biden was able to pull off Arizona, that would be quite a big victory for Democrats. And we look again at Arizona. In the West, you could see that Hillary Clinton did well with how polls saw her. For example, Nevada and Colorado, she was favored in by around the same, by maybe a little bit even less than she was favored in states like Michigan and Wisconsin, and she still managed to hold them. Whether that's because of the border wall and people voting against that, or whether it's just the voters, Democratic voters in the West being less complacent than those in the Midwest, or Republican voters in the Midwest being more strongly for Donald Trump at that time period. I don't know, but in the West, Hillary Clinton polled with her poll numbers, and she wasn't favored to win Arizona by election day. She was down by about almost 2 points, 1.8 points from election day, and in July, that number was around the same, about actually a little bit less than a point, around 0.5 points. But really, for the most part, she was never really favored to win Arizona. But now, again, things have changed pretty drastically in Arizona. Arizona. Joe Biden is favored right now by 4.2 points. Again, that's under a 5 point threshold that just myself has given for these polls. So I'm still gonna say that it will be a tilt for Donald Trump until I see it happen. I'm gonna say it will still lean, not lean, but tilt for the Republican Party. But again, in the West, that has been different. So I would give Joe Biden a better chance of winning a state like Arizona than a state like North Carolina, just because of how states in the West followed polling last election cycle. Three more states that I want to look at: Georgia, Texas, and Ohio. Now, Ohio is a state that has usually gone back and forth between Republicans and Democrats. By election day, Donald Trump was favored to win it by almost 2 points over Hillary Clinton. So it wasn't a big surprise that they lost. And generally, when Republicans win Ohio, they've won the election in recent history. And on July 1st, Hillary was favored in Ohio by almost 4 points, around 3.4 points, 3.5 points. Today, Joe Biden is leading by about 2.5 points in Ohio, so not as well as Hillary was doing at this point last year, and not within that 5% threshold. So at this point, I'm gonna say that Ohio is actually, I'll even give it a lean for the Republican Party, just because um, it it just seems to be one of the few states that isn't going in a Democratic. Uh, it's not leaning more towards Democrats recently, so I give Ohio still a good chance to go to Trump, especially if you think that this is the worst that Trump's polling is going to get. I still think it's pretty likely that he'll carry Ohio, um, but still very much a possibility for the Biden campaign. Um, so in uh, 2016, state to watch, just based on 538 states to watch, they weren't watching Texas. And, come election day, Donald Trump held a nearly 9 point advantage, 8.5 points advantage over Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton was never up in polling in Texas throughout June until, election day in November. On July 1st, her polling numbers were close. She was around 5.8 points out of the lead in Texas, um, which is one of the closest time periods she's been leading Texas. Um, but now in Texas, not saying that Joe Biden is going to win Texas, but right now, see, Donald Trump only leads by zero point 0.4 points in Texas, less than half a percentage point. That number yesterday was actually zero point 0.2, and it's been below 1 point for a few days now, based on polling. Again, Biden hasn't officially led in Texas on average on any of these days, but he's come a lot closer than Hillary Clinton did in 2016, and so again, we'll give Texas, like Ohio, saying it's leaning Republican, which is a lot better than Democrats have been able to do in recent elections and really for a very long time. That would be a big win for Trump, obviously, but that's one that he obviously has to win and should definitely expect to win, but it might be becoming tighter than he wants it to. And then finally, the last state that I'm going to talk about, you know, fully is the state of Georgia, which polling numbers in Georgia have become very interesting, especially since the, the Black Lives Matter movement regained steam. You could see in 2016, Hillary might have led it for a hot second in the middle of August, but by the time election day came around, Donald Trump was up by 4 points. He was very much favored to win Georgia, and again, the state in 2016 in July, Trump was favored by about 2.3 points. Today, Biden is favored actually by 1.7 points. Again, nowhere near the 5 point threshold, so I'm not saying that Biden is going to win the state of Georgia, but what I'm saying is that he has a chance to, something that Hillary, I don't think, really did in 2016. Um, so you can put that as a tilt for the Republican Party. The other states, Nevada, um, Iowa, New Hampshire, and Maine. Maine's second district and Nebraska's second district. Um, so states like New Hampshire and Nevada went to Hillary Clinton in 2016, considering that Joe Biden is more popular than Hillary was, and considering everything that's happened in the country, I think we can not safely put it in the Republican category, but we can say that both states are leaning that way, both New Hampshire and Nevada. Both states are polling during the simulation. Nevada, about 87% of the time goes to Biden. New Hampshire, about 84% of the time goes to Biden. So we can say that those states are leaning in that direction. And as for the states of Iowa and the states and Maine 2nd District, those are going to Trump within like the 50% margins. So we'll say that those are leaning Republican at the moment. And Nebraska slightly is going to the Democratic Party in the 2nd District. But for the sake of the polling numbers, we could say that Nebraska is going to the Republican Party. So as of July 1st, 2020, this is what your map looks like. Biden obviously getting well over 270 electoral votes by keeping all of Hillary's states and flipping the states of Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Florida. Again, when you look at states like Georgia, North Carolina, and Arizona, those are other paths that Joe Biden may be able to take if polling continues to head his way. But I'm not ready to go in that direction yet. But conservatively speaking, not a sure thing that Joe Biden would win the race if today happened, but it would be very likely that he would, and we don't know where the poll numbers will be in about 4 months and a few days from this time. But if you are someone who is hoping the Democrats can take the White House in 2020, I think you could feel pretty good about your chances right now. But you want to keep an eye on the polls, and when election day does come, don't become too complacent, because as we saw in 2016, the states of Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin were very close, despite it looking like an electoral landslide. Those states flipped the other way. We'd have Hillary Clinton in the White House right now and not Donald Trump. But that's the way it looks right now. Things can change in a week. They could change, obviously, in 4 months from now. But as of right now, we have Joe Biden with 307 electoral votes to Donald Trump's 231 electoral votes. And that would obviously be a huge victory for the Democrats to get Donald Trump out of office. So that's all I got for you today. Again, I'm going to try to do this once a week, maybe twice a week, and try to focus on a few other things. Today we focused on some of the main swing states and how they're differing between now and 2016. Again, Florida, Pennsylvania, two huge states are looking a little bit better for the Democrats now than they were in 2016, and those would be enough to carry Joe Biden to the presidency. So if those numbers stay the way they are now, Democrats could feel good going into the 2020 election. But we'll see where things head. If you like this video, please subscribe. It's my first time doing it, but please subscribe if you liked it, or if you have suggestions of some things that you want me to focus on. Again, using 538 and 270 to win.com is how I kind of created this map. And again, I could use those to focus on other aspects of the election. But yeah, thanks for watching if you did, and hopefully I'll see you in a future video. Thank you.